Hello, I am Kevin Allen, and this is Technically Something, and today we are going to be talking about making a mechanical creature in Photoshop. Now, we're going to start off simple. We're going to make sure that we get the creature that we want first, and then I'm going to show you how to use the Warp Transform, and then you can start taking everyday objects and start putting them over the top of your animal until it becomes something a little bit more cybernetic. Maybe it's more like an android, maybe it's kind of like a full-on steampunk robot. I don't know. It's completely up to you what you use, but I'm going to show you how to get there. First thing I'm going to do is find the animal. So I'm just on Google and I'm just going to search up the animal that I want. Start with the dolphin, and remember at this point you want to make sure that you're getting a decent sized image. It's not crucial if it's a little pixelated, because at the end of the day we're just going to be covering up this animal anyway. But if you still want those high res photos, remember in Google you can go to Tools, Size, and click on Large, and then it will sort out images from largest to smallest based on your search. I think I could work with this one, and it's huge, so that's even better. So once it's fully loaded, I will right click, copy image, and then I'm going to go back into Photoshop. And remember, we don't create a new file until after we've copied the image, so that when we do go to New File, it should read from your clipboard size, and right now it looks like it matches the size of the picture. I'm at 72 DPI, but I want to make sure that it's higher than that. I'm going to go to at least 150 in this case, and I'll paste it. Perfect. Okay, now let's make sure that we keep our layers organized. We're going to name them as we go. So this base layer, I'm going to double click, and I shall just call it Ref, or Reference. And what I'll do is also turn down the opacity to about 20 to 30%, depending on your picture. You want to be able to see it, but you also just need it as a reference. Okay, now the fun part. So you can find everyday objects to start putting over the top of your creature and start making it look more mechanical or like a robot. So I'm just gonna search up something to start, like, I don't know, spoon. Yeah, I think that'll work for now. Okay, now in the past we have made sure to be non-destructive, but we're going to be using so many layers, and the Warp Transform works a lot easier if we don't have extra pixels that are masked out. So we're actually, for the first time in all of my lessons, we're going to just hit delete. Okay, so we'll delete out the background, and all I want to keep out of everything here is the top of the spoon. So I'm actually going to erase the bottom part too. Okay, now what I need to do is transform this and get this set up where I want it to be. And right now I'm gonna use it mainly for the top of the head. Now we almost have it there. It definitely matches the front of the head for the dolphin, but then it goes off of the edge there, and normally we would just have to mask it or erase it, but there's a way that we can actually warp this so that it matches the curve of the dolphin. And here's how you do that. You'll go to Edit, Transform, Warp. Now, it may look different if you're using Photopia.com. You may not have a grid like this, but the application is still the same. You're going to grab corners to move the corner where you want it, and you can move these little handles as well. And each of these parts can be moved until you are able to curve the object, or in this case, warp it, to the exact shape that you want. Now I'm going to use this part down here to kind of stretch it out a little bit. And you can see how I'm widening it up a bit. And I think that that's good, so I'm going to leave that as is. Once you're done with your transformation, make sure to hit Enter. And there's one layer down. But get used to this habit throughout this project. Make sure that you name your layers as you go. So I just got done with this, so I'm going to call this head/top. Just so I know to go back, and if I need to make any changes, I can. Trust me, you'll want to name these as you go. You're about to have a lot of layers. I mean, minimum 20 layers, and that's absolute minimum. So you want to make sure that you can track as we go. Now I'm going to find a few more examples, and actually, since I've shown you that process, I'm just going to be doing that again and again and again. I'm going to find an object, I'm going to place it, transform it, and then warp it however I need, and then name the layer. So I'm going to speed up this process so that you can kind of see how it looks over the course of several minutes. Enjoy. All right, so now the first part of this is done. I just took the last several minutes going and deciding a theme for what I was going to do for my dolphin. And once I started off with the spoon, I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of like chrome and a lot of reflective metals. So as I was searching, if you were watching, I looked up chrome tube, chrome planes, fins, tail fins, or even like the side of a Corvette, but I made sure that it was silver. Like, you can go all over the place if you want. You could make your creature out of vegetables if you want. But the whole point is that you use these different images and lay them on top of each other, and then use the warp transform so that you can actually get them into the shape that you want. So that's the first step. So what I'm going to do is highlight all of these layers that I just made. So I'm going to click on the top, hold Shift, and click on the bottom. And then I'll hit Control G or Command G if you're on a Mac. And this will group everything up. We'll name the group Objects. Plain and simple. And now what I'm going to start working on are little details. And I'm going to show you some really cool tricks that you can do even with the brush. So say I wanted to make it look like this thing had some energy coursing through it. Well, first off, I'm going to turn off the bottom layer, the reference layer. Okay, and I'm going to double click on the background, and we're going to actually change this so that we can see better, at least in my case. You might be able to see yours clearly, but I'm going to use the paint bucket, and I'm going to just put in a fill color of like a dark gray in the background so that I can see my creature a bit more clearly. Now, what I'm going to do is start adding some details, and this is where you can use everything that you've learned in Photoshop. If you've watched my previous videos, or if you're new to the channel, you can go back and check that stuff out. But for those of you taking my class, you should kind of know some of the tools that you can use by now. So in one case, let's say I want to have some like cool gaps in there that look like they have neon energy or something. So I'll just call this layer Energy, and let's double click into it. And in the Layer Styles panel, what I want to do is make sure that my color overlay is set to the color that I want for that energy. And since it's a dolphin, I'm going to go with kind of like a bluish color, very bright. And I'm also going to use the Bevel Emboss. And I want to make sure that we have a chisel hard, and we want it to be an outer bevel. And I want it to screen, but I want it to screen with just kind of a dark gray. Now, and you can see kind of a preview off to the side if you're using Photoshop, and I think it may be the same in Photopea. It kind of gives you a preview. With all of that set, and I want to make sure that sizing's just right. And we can always come back and change that if we need to. But now, I could zoom in. And let's say the first thing I want to do is add an eye to this thing. So I could get my brush, just use a simple solid round brush. And remember, this is on a layer above everything else. And I can just click. And then we have an eye there. I can also go over and have little spots. Say I want to have little like lines right here, stylistic lines coming off the sides or something. And right now they look a little bit big, so I'm going to go back and change that. You can always just open the effects, and then I'll go to the Bevel Emboss, and I'll just reduce the size. That looks better. And I'm also noticing that I want it to glow blue. I don't necessarily want just the color blue to be on the inside, so I'll change the color overlay to a very bright, almost white blue, and we'll give it an outer glow and change that color to the more saturated blue I had before. And we'll make sure that it's going out enough to be seen. There we go. Okay. And now I can start going in and adding some like little details. Like instead of just having this little opening spot here, I could actually go along this line and add little details if I want. And this is just using that click, shift, click method to make sure that the brush goes along and adds in straight lines. That's one example for some details. Another thing that you could do, and I call this the little details section, is you could go and find something like the top of the screw. So if we look, screw head. Yeah. So you can choose one that you like that's just simple. This one's kind of chromy, and that's what I'm going for. So I'm going to copy this and go back, and I'm going to paste it, get rid of that background as usual. Make sure that the tolerance is low enough so that we're not deleting most of it. And if that still doesn't work, you know what? We can also just get the circular selection tool, draw a circle around it, and Control-Shift-I, and delete everything around it. Now, if we want this to stand out, what we could do is same thing. We're going to add some layer styles to it. So let me just call it screw, and we're going to double click on the layer, get into the layer styles, make sure that you can see it, and we'll turn on bevel emboss and get the size where we want it. And let's make sure that it's just defined enough. There we go, that looks a little bit better. So once you have everything all set up, you click OK. And here's the neat thing. So now we can definitely see that screw where we put it, but we don't have to repeat all of that stuff every single time we put in another screw. You can just right click and you could duplicate this layer. We could call it screw copy, or I'll just do screw 2. And now I'll move this one where I want it to be. And you could repeat this process. If it's easier for you, you can just click and drag the layer down to the new layer icon, and that'll allow you to place the next one. So you can see how over a long enough time period, you could really get into some detail with this and make it look awesome. There's a lot of really neat stuff that you can do. And that's kind of what is up to you at that point. You can add in screws, you can add in like air intakes, you could add wires, you could do just random stuff like metallic scales or chainmail or whatever you think makes sense. But by the time you're finished, you'll have something super detailed. So again, I'm going to do another quick time lapse on my details so you can see what that looks like, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, now we have the creature more or less finished. We have, give or take, 20 layers on this project. I'll just call this group details. And I'll group these up and call them jets. So at this point, if you would like, if you have extra time, this is when you can start to make an area that is fitting for your mechanical creature. If that's using the original picture and then adding some stuff to it, like in my case, you know, I have everything here, but I added these jets. We could take any of these different images, like I could take this blue flame and copy the image, get it all separated out, transform it, make sure it's at the right angle. Now I have 2 jets, so I will just duplicate this layer and make sure that I have 2 here. And then make sure that both those layers have some kind of a blending mode that matches with the scene. Yeah, little details. But that more or less would wrap up the techniques used in this project. So if you liked what you saw, make sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Kevin Allen, and this was Technically Something. See you guys later.